The goal of minimalism is to own 100 things, or maybe 10 things, or perhaps just a single perfect wooden bowl. This is the caricature, the aesthetic sold on social media feeds filled with empty white rooms. But the truth is, the most effective minimalists might have closets that look just as full as yours. By the end of this, you will understand that the number of objects you own is the least interesting part of this entire philosophy. And the reason your past attempts to declutter have left you frustrated and defeated is because you were treating a symptom, fighting a battle on the wrong front entirely. The visible victory of a clean countertop is seductive. We see the before and after pictures, the bags of discarded stuff, and we feel a vicarious sense of control. For a moment, sorting our possessions feels like sorting our lives. This initial purge provides a genuine, short-term neurological reward. It's a hit of dopamine. But a week later, or maybe a month, the clutter creeps back. The piles return. The sense of being overwhelmed settles in again. This happens because physical clutter is merely the final visible stage of a much deeper issue. Treating it is like putting a cool cloth on a feverish head. It provides temporary relief, but it does nothing to address the underlying infection. The objects themselves are just artifacts. They are receipts. Receipts for past decisions, past anxieties, and past versions of you that you're afraid to let go of. To truly understand the clutter, we have to stop looking at the objects and start auditing the receipts. When we do, we find the real culprit: decision fatigue. Every single object you own makes a small, silent demand on your attention. Which of these 7 black shirts should I wear? Where does this kitchen gadget go? Does this old cable belong to something I still own? Should I fix this, sell this, or donate this? Each question is a tiny cognitive transaction. Alone, they are trivial, but compounded over thousands of items, day after day, they create a constant, low-grade hum of mental noise. This isn't just a feeling, it's a measurable drain on a finite resource. The work of psychologist Roy Baumeister showed that our capacity for self-control and intelligent decision-making is like a muscle. It gets tired. The mental energy you spend debating which pair of shoes to wear is drawn from the exact same account you need to solve a complex problem at work, to have a patient conversation with your partner, or to resist an unhealthy impulse in the afternoon. Your clutter is actively making you worse at the things that actually matter in your life. It's death by 1,000 micro-decisions. So the answer seems simple: reduce objects to reduce decisions. But this is where the next trap appears. The person who gets rid of 200 books only to spend the next 3 months researching the perfect e-reader, the person who sells all their clothes and then agonizes for weeks over buying one ethically sourced, built-to-last merino wool t-shirt. They've fallen for a subtler version of the same problem. They've reduced the quantity of their decisions, but have massively increased the perceived weight and importance of each one. This obsessive optimization creates its own special kind of fatigue. They are still fixated on the objects. The real problem is the fear that the objects represent. Specifically, the tyranny of the just-in-case object. Open the most cluttered space in your home, your garage, your basement, your junk drawer. What you're looking at is an identity graveyard. It's a collection of physical anchors to fantasy versions of yourself, the expensive running shoes for the marathon runner you are going to become, the guitar for the musician you'd be if you just had more time, the box of craft supplies for the creative, hands-on person you admire. The just-in-case items are the most difficult to discard because getting rid of them feels like a small death. It feels like admitting that you will probably never become that person. It is the final closing of a door to a possible future. This is why decluttering is so emotionally exhausting. It forces you to confront the gap between the life you live and the many lives you imagine for yourself. Each object you discard is a quiet funeral for a fantasy self, and your brain has a powerful cognitive bias designed to make these funerals feel almost impossible to attend. This bias is called the endowment effect, first demonstrated by researchers Daniel Kahneman and Richard Thaler. The principle is simple. We place a higher value on things merely because we own them. In their classic experiment, people given a coffee mug wouldn't sell it for less than $5.25, but another group, who didn't own the mug, would only pay $2.75 to buy it. Same mug, the value doubled, purely through the act of ownership. Your brain is doing this constantly. That old treadmill in your basement, which you would never consider buying at a garage sale, suddenly feels like it's worth a few $100s now that you have to get rid of it. Your brain codes letting go as a loss. It activates pain centers. It screams at you that you are losing something of value. But this calculation ignores the invisible price tag on every object you own, the continuing cost of ownership, the space it occupies in your home, the time it takes to clean, maintain, and organize it, the low-level attention it constantly demands. Every item in your life charges you a kind of psychological rent. Most of the time, that rent is far higher than the object's actual utility. The famous question from Japanese organizing consultant Marie Kondo, "Does it spark joy?" is a clever psychological hack. It reframes the decision. It bypasses the brain's loss-averse accounting and asks a different question entirely. The question becomes, what feeling am I gaining by keeping this in my life? It shifts the focus from the pain of loss to the potential for gain. Critics are right to point out that minimalism can become a performance, a privileged aesthetic of expensive empty spaces. That is a valid critique of how it is often marketed. The underlying principle, however, is about intention, which is available to anyone. It's an audit of why you own what you own. But what happens when you've done all this? You've decluttered the physical items, you've navigated the emotional funerals and overcome the endowment effect. Your home is clearer, yet the feeling of being overwhelmed persists. The anxiety is still there. This is because you've only cleared out the garage. You haven't touched the two places where the most insidious clutter actually lives: your calendar and your mind. True minimalism is about applying the same ruthless discernment to your commitments and your thoughts. Saying yes to a coffee meeting you don't want to attend is the functional equivalent of buying a useless souvenir. It clutters your future with an obligation that serves no real purpose. An inbox with thousands of unread emails is digital hoarding. Each one is an unresolved question, a micro-demand on your future attention. A social media feed is a torrent of other people's priorities designed to hijack your own. Every notification is a bid to steal your focus. This is where the practice of physical decluttering pays off. It's the tutorial level. It trains the muscle of saying no. First, you learn to say no to a sweater you don't love. Then, you learn to say no to a dinner invitation that drains you. Eventually, you can say no to a career path that isn't aligned with your deepest values. The same principle applies to mental clutter. Replaying a past mistake over and over is like keeping a broken appliance in the middle of your living room. Holding on to a grudge is like refusing to take out the trash. These are unresolved cognitive loops that consume processing power. Minimalism, in its final form, is the active curation of your own mind. It is the choice to focus. It is the deliberate act of letting thoughts go, of unsubscribing from mental drama, and of focusing your attention on the present moment or the problem at hand. This is the true freedom, the ability to say no, not out of negativity, but out of a fierce and protective yes to something more important. But this creates a new, and for many, a terrifying problem: empty space. An empty weekend, an evening with no plans, an hour with no notifications. What are you supposed to do with all that silence? You fill it. You fill it with the things that truly matter. You get rid of the trivial many to make room for the vital few. Minimalism is an aggressive act of addition disguised as subtraction. You clear out the clutter to make space for deep work on a project that excites you. You clear your calendar to make space for unstructured present time with the people you love. You clear your mind of noise to make space for creativity, for reflection, for the quiet voice of your own intuition. You intentionally create boredom because boredom is the canvas upon which new ideas appear. The point of owning less is to live more deliberately, more intentionally. With more focus, the objects were never the point. They were just the gatekeepers to your attention. And in an economy that strip mines that attention for profit, the person who can control where their focus goes is the only one who holds the real wealth. This is why the most productive people often have the most boring routines, which is a different kind of freedom entirely.